Right now, switch your family to T-Mobile and get 4 lines for $25 a line with AutoPay and 5G access included on America's largest 5G network. So don't wait. Get unlimited and nationwide 5G access for the whole family for just $25 a line. Visit a T-Mobile store or T-Mobile.com today.
Plus taxes and fees. Customers may notice lower speeds and further reduction if using over 50 gigs a month due to data prioritization. Video at 480p. Unlimited while on our network. Qualifying credit and 4+ lines required. Capable device required for 5G. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain features. See T-Mobile.com.
What's going on, folks? Thanks for hitting that download button and checking out a brand new episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, your one-stop shop for toys, tech, and talk with some assembly required. I'm your host, Rich Butler, and if this is your first time checking out an episode, first of all, welcome. Second of all, a little bit about what we do here. Toys and Tech of the Trade is an interview series where we sit down with content creators, entrepreneurs, and just kick-ass folks on our radar and share the gadgets, the gear, and the tech that they use to create their content, run their business, and overall just be more productive. When it comes to toys, it's not just about action figures, Funko Pops, all of that stuff. Our definition of toys here is very broad because people's interests and the things that make them happy vary. So what we may consider collectibles, some people may consider their toys, whether it's cars, salt and pepper shakers, wind chimes. You'd be surprised what people consider their toys, and we embrace that generalized definition here quite enthusiastically, I'll admit. So with that out of the way, a little bit of housekeeping before we jump into this week's guest. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for the feedback over the last couple of weeks with regards to episodes and what they'd like to see. I heard you, and we're going to be doing some interesting stuff in the future. Also, we will be doing another Q&A episode, and I'll be putting out the stuff for that in the coming weeks to start building for that episode. Also, we will be doing another holiday gift guide. I know many of you really enjoyed last year's and got value from it, so we're going to be trying that again this year. Probably going to release it second week, middle of November, right before Thanksgiving. Hopefully, that's the plan. Fingers crossed. And we just want to spotlight all the gadgets and gear that we've checked out over the last year. It's going to be gadgets and gear and services that we use, that we recommend, and that some of our guests have recommended as well. So be on the lookout for that in the middle of November. Lastly, shameless plug. I got another podcast coming because, why wouldn't I? I'm trying to do less work, and for some reason I just give myself more work. But in any case, brand new podcast coming soon. It's going to be a limited series. It's not going to be any sort of long-term endeavor. It's probably going to be a limited series with maybe some specials here and there. If you've been on the Rageworks Network site, you've probably seen the artwork, the placeholder artwork for it. And, you probably kind of have an idea of what it is. But in any case, be on the lookout for that. We're going to be probably releasing at least 5 episodes to kick things off. Some of them have already been recorded. Just have to master and mix them and get them nice for you guys. So be on the lookout for that. All right. That wraps up the housekeeping. Let's turn it over to our guest and learn about the toys and tech of their trade. All right, so this week's guest is very unique for a couple of different reasons. Number one, because his talents are creating a service and filling a void in a niche that has affected many podcasters and affects many that are doing shows to this day. And that is one of the biggest questions, which is, how do I get guests? My guest this week, Brent Basham, is going to talk about that and his new service, Poddit, which he is a co-founder of. And we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of the business, how he got started, why that's such an important service to have in this space, and more importantly, how can you use it? So let's get right into it and chop it up with Brent and learn about the toys and tech of his trade. What's going on, Brent? How are you?
Hey, thank you for having me, man. This is really cool.
I'm super excited to sit down and chat with you for a couple of reasons. As I said before we started recording, the Poddit service is something that should have been in existence a long time ago, and it just takes somebody to wake up, get annoyed about it, and get a kick in the ass to solve that problem. And, I want to get into that, but more importantly, I want to get into just how you got your start in the space. So let's unpack that and start there.
Yeah. So before all of this happened and we created a SaaS and launched all this crazy stuff that's happening now that you saw and kind of connected us, back in 2014, I was just a regular dude in the tech space, occupationally, not entrepreneurially. But I had a buddy who I had met in college the second time around. We were both kind of back at school to learn computer science, and we did. And I befriended him. He could do all kind of stuff. Man, this guy could program. He could do graphic design, all this kind of crazy stuff. And so I thought I need to know that dude. And I got to know him, and turns out he was a really good guy. He's a good friend of mine now. He's actually one of the co-founders of Poddit too. But before that, we had this, we ended up working together after college. We ended up at the same job and had a good chance to talk a lot. And he had a daughter. I had a son and two daughters. And we realized we were having all these conversations about how technology is influencing the world of parenting, both good and bad, right? There was all kinds of resources available. There was all kinds of challenges coming at you from social media and cyberbullying and all kinds of stuff. And we realized we were the last digital immigrants raising the first digital natives, and there would never be this point in history again. And so we said, you know what, we should probably podcast about it. Or rather, my co-host said that, and I said, what's a podcast? I had no idea at the time, and was a noob. And again, a lot of people like yourself had already been doing this for years, which is embarrassing because I'm in the tech space. But I was late to the game, but I became an addict really, really quickly. And as soon as I listened to a few, I was hooked. And I said, yeah, that sounds like it'd be an amazing thing to talk about. So we started. We were terrible. And we just kept going from there. Eventually, even adding our kids in the clips in the show. And it's we pod faded, but it has a very special place in my heart.
Now, the funny thing is, I liked the foundation for it, because the thing that gets me, and you made a very interesting point, is the fact that we are, in all honesty, the last of the Mohicans with this stuff. I was actually talking about that with my wife. Like, we got to see, I'm an 80s baby, so I got to see the end of the 8-track, but the beginning of the cassette, the beginning of CDs, the beginning of VHS, the death of the Laserdisc, the birth of DVD, the birth of Blu-ray, and now streaming. So, when our kids get older, they won't know what it's like to go and buy a CD single at a Coconuts or a Sam Goody or an FYE. They're not going to know what Tower Records is. It's such a crazy, crazy concept.
Yeah, and it's changed so much. I mean, technology's always sort of evolved, but what's happened with the digital age is that everything's sort of on demand. You're always connected. I think that's the key point of it, right? Is that my kids and your child will never know not always being connected to other people in a multitude of ways and channels. Everything's always available. You don't know something, just search it up. That's the term they use, which you'll learn soon enough if you don't already. Just search it up. It's just always accessible. I grew up when you looked at the latest dictionaries or encyclopedias rather, or you go to the library. It was a point in history where things really changed. Like I said, there's always been this evolution of technology and different mediums and different things, but we went from not connected to always connected, and it's changed the world in a lot of different ways that it's happening so quickly. We don't really know how to handle it, and we're not prepared for it, and we're messing it up, frankly. And, that's what we wanted to talk about. We didn't come at the show from the perspective that we're these parenting experts, because we're not. We didn't come at the show like we're technology experts, even though we're enthusiasts and we have a lot of good knowledge about it. But we wanted to just talk about these things and talk to people who were digging into these things and take advantage of the mediums that were available, like podcasting, to really have conversations and maybe figure some of this stuff out, because we felt like those conversations weren't happening. And at the time, there really wasn't any parenting show that was in that vein at all. They were all kind of more the old school people with the old school books, rehashing some of that stuff. And it's valuable, but it wasn't the conversations we wanted to have. And we wanted to talk about Star Wars sometimes. So we did, it was our show. So
how did that resonate when you started to podcast and you started to kind of get, your first couple of listens and you started seeing like feedback and things like that. How did that impact you as not only as a parent, but also now as a creator?
It was powerful. It was scary at first, as I'm sure you know, or maybe you can remember. My voice was terrible. My authentic voice was terrible. I was a terrible communicator. I was nervous. I was stiff. I was all of that stuff. But once you get past that and you start to get feedback from people that, man, I really listened to your show. I mean, we had guys come on there that would email us and tell us, I was in the delivery room listening to your show and I feel more confident I was scared to death. I mean, just vulnerable. You wouldn't imagine what these people, and I'm sure you've gotten emails and things from listeners, and it's impacting in a way you wouldn't expect. It really is powerful that you can make a difference to somebody by flipping on a mic, by having a conversation with your buddy, maybe a guest, and then you set it out there and you kind of forget about it a little bit. You might promote it or whatever, but you don't really think about the impact it has. And for it to come back to you, oh my gosh, as a dad, it made me feel like other people were going through the same kind of things we were going through, challenges, sharing photos of each other's kids, etc. It was like, man, I mean, you know how awesome it is to be a dad and to be able to share that with other dads like you with the tech industry or in the tech industry or in the love tech or enthusiasts and kind of I don't want to call them nerds, but the guys who really love tech and just people like you. And to find that sort of vein of people in the world and connect with them in an authentic way about something you care about as much as you do your children was priceless. It was really an amazing experience. We did it for 3 years. We recorded the show. That's
tremendous. And it's funny. I tell a lot of my colleagues on the network, I tell them, I'm like, listen, your voice may be what gets someone through a commute, gets them through their drive to work, gets them through, a rough patch. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe you put a smile on their face. Hearing that you brought that level of value to so many different dads it's inspiring, man. I mean, you said you guys pod faded, but the value that you put out there, you can never take that away. There's a dad out there who you probably made 10 times more confident in being a better father or just being a better tech savvy parent than he was going into this from the start. Not to mention the fact that I feel that the fatherhood community is very, very underrepresented in a lot of facets because we have so many different hats we have to wear. I mean, mothers do as well, but fathers, we have to be role models, providers, we have to be the hunters, we have to be the gatherers. And with that comes certain stigmas and certain things that I just feel at times are very underrepresented. And to see that you and your co-hosts were out there bringing that level of value and filling that void is inspirational in itself.
Yeah, we had a lot of value come back to us too. I mean, it was very reciprocal. And one of the things we tried to do was be authentic and be vulnerable and just bring a dad show that, a lot of the machismo might not expect and make it okay to love your daughter and to not be afraid of those feelings. And, just the things that you don't necessarily get when you're growing up as a young man. But that it's okay to care as a dad. And that was part of the show, but certainly touched on a lot of things. And one of the coolest things I think we did on the show was we had what we called the roundtable episodes. And we literally, and this was, as a podcast, so it was just a little scary. We would just invite people on the show that were listeners and we brought them on for better or worse. And I could tell you from experience, it was for better or worse. Some of them were fantastic. Some of them it was like pulling teeth, but you know what? They were represented. They were part of it. And even the ones that I wouldn't necessarily think had that engagement or would be a great guest, I think they connected with people that were out there that might not resonate as much with me. So it all had value, because it was a community. And I think that's probably what I'm the most proud of is that. And it was missed when it went away, and it was missed by me and by Andrew, my co-host, and by a lot of people when it went away. So hopefully we'll get a chance to come back around to it at some point.
Now, I want to get into the pivot now from pod fading to now planting your flag in the podcast guest space. Let's talk about the origins of Poddit and how that came to be.
Yeah, so that was really no grand plan. We're going to be this crazy company and do all these things, and maybe it goes there, but that wasn't it at all. It was we pod faded. And as you can imagine, we were doing a show about being dads. You know how much effort and time a podcast takes.
Yep.
We were splicing in clips of our kids. We were getting guests. I took a lot of pride in the guests we got. So there was a lot of time and effort in creating the show. And it just became too much. I felt that I have 3 kids and they were reaching ages where they needed me in certain ways. You know, they needed my presence in certain ways.
Yep.
They needed me to sit up and watch a movie with them rather than record a podcast episode. There was just things that started to come up. And so that was part of it. But the guest side was a factor because that was one part of the overall piece of what we did that took a lot of time and effort. And so as a result of that, that was part of why we pod faded. It wasn't exclusively why, but it was definitely part of why. And a couple of years later, we thought, you know, this problem, in our opinion, and there's a couple of flat directories for guests and some things out there, but in our opinion, this was not something that had been solved the right way yet. And we're CS guys. We solve problems. It's what we do. We'd love to do to a fault, maybe, if you ask my wife. But we just love to solve problems, and we didn't think this was solved well. And we thought, you know what? We're the guys, we can code this. We know designer, we know developers. Like, we need to group together and try to build this thing and see what it can be. And that's really where it came from. It was really kind of scratching our own itch. And now it's funny, I'm starting a new podcast now. It's not a co-hosted one. And we're intending to get back on the digital ad source. And I'm actually using the platform already to reach out to guests. And it actually got me in the door of a pretty big guest because I have a nice podcast page. And even though I don't have the new podcast yet, I have a profile of me and I have my old show and some episodes they can listen to. It's a nice representation of what I did in that space to point them to. And it presents me well and it gives me a good chance. Now, of course, that doesn't do all the work, but at least lets me look good to try to get on some shows or get some guests. So it's been pretty effective so far. And we're only 5 weeks into the beta, something like that. I don't know. It's been a whirlwind. We're getting all kinds of great feedback and trying to just make something amazing for the podcast community. That's really the goal.
Yeah, I think that's such a huge part of it. I think so many people, people want to wake up and they want to be, and it's cliche. I use this often, but they want to be the next Joe Rogan. They want to be the next Tim Ferriss. They want to be the next Adam Carolla. And, you got to tell them, like, listen, just be the best you, because a lot of those guys had an asterisk next to their success. Tim Ferriss was an accomplished author. Joe Rogan was a media personality, an entertainer, a stand-up comedian. Adam Carolla was a entertainer. And the more you see that, the more you realize, and that's a big problem with people that get into the space, is that they go in, they have this idea, and they automatically think that it's lightning in a bottle, and it's not. It's a very arduous, very stressful, very, very unforgiving process. And the fact that your service makes at least part of it simple is a no-brainer for any podcaster that's trying either to get their message out there to other audiences or just to bring value to their audience with, different guests. I think that's it. Your site and the Poddit service just takes a lot of the guesswork out of it.
Yeah, we had we were lucky enough to get a couple of big name guests. And I don't say that to brag. I say that because we probably shouldn't have. We only had, I don't know, maybe 2,000 listeners at our peak, which, I mean, honestly, if that's people in a room, that's pretty big. And I'm proud of that. But in terms of audience size, when you look at these people on, David Allen of Getting Things Done, he's got like 2 million Twitter followers, or Greg McEwen. These are New York Times best-selling authors. They came on our show. But the problem is I feel like we got lucky, and I certainly got told no a lot. I reached out to a lot of people, but I didn't have the equivalent of a press page. I didn't have an easy place to kind of point them to position key episodes, to showcase maybe a custom video for them. I didn't really have a presence on the web to point a guest to try to get them to come on my show. And on the other side, if I wanted to be a guest I didn't realize at the time how valuable that is, but pro tip, getting on other shows is an amazing way to grow your audience, right? Because they get to know, like, and trust you. And sometimes if you can connect with the right audiences, it might make sense to cross promote too. But on both sides of the coin, from the podcast side, from the guest side, it seemed to make a lot of sense to create a place where people could create those profiles, those pages, and I could just go there, point people there, and they could easily connect with me and see kind of what I'm all about. without pointing them to like a website of Digital Dads, was really pointed to my listeners. And maybe we didn't even have an episode or an interview episode as our last one. So it was solving a lot of different pain points. That was the goal. And again, it's evolving rapidly. But it definitely, we knew there was enough of a kernel there that was lacking and caused us pain that we wanted to try to solve that for people.
Well, I think that's also one of the other, you touched on something. Directing people to the right place is difficult, because when you're getting your podcast off the ground, some people want to have to create a website, some people don't. And then when you don't have, to your point, that social proof, that backup to try and land a big guest, it becomes more and more difficult. And then, you could check out my Facebook, or you could check out my Twitter. And next thing you know, you're giving people 7 different links that may or may not even resonate with what you're trying to do. Like if you do a podcast about, I don't know, ham radio, and you want to get somebody in that industry and you don't have a website, and you tell them, well, you could check out my Facebook page, and your Facebook page is photos of your kids and photos of your dog. Like that's not helping you. It's not allowing you to engage with that audience. And I think that that's what grabbed me from the service when I checked it out before I even signed up. I went in there and I said, wait a minute, you got your 30-second pitch. You got all your links. If somebody wants to see your LinkedIn or your Twitter or your Facebook or your Instagram, probably. I know you guys are probably thinking of adding that. That social proof, at least there's a nice, cohesive, easy to digest page where everything is.
Yeah, that's the goal. And so what we have now, we've just sort of simplified it a lot, where each page, so on the podcast page, you can apply. And the idea is when you apply, you send an application you can look at from your podcast. You go to your podcast and you see all the applicants coming in. And the nice thing is, because they're in network, you can click the link and look at who they are and then click back. So you can look at all these, because I remember when we used to get all these requests in email, it was a nightmare. It was an absolute nightmare, because they send me some link and I go to a website and I'm trying to figure out, where do they have a past episode? Like where's their social? It was just very difficult. Right. So I thought, well, if we make this in this way, when you are just sort of back and forth between different profiles pretty quick, I mean, really after a couple, you get the sense of how it's laid out. You can pop over to social if you want. You can see the social proof. There's actually a testimonial feature where other people can give you a testimonial. You can't give it to yourself, but you get to choose if you want it on your profile or not. So then you get that social proof. And of course, that links over to their profile. So it's really, really intended at the beginning to work without the network. But as the network grows, we're really expecting it to be really powerful for everybody.
And you've also been putting foot to pavement, going to different podcast events, doing that level of promotion, and people, going back to what we were talking about before about growing. Even in your case, this is a big challenge in itself, because just like growing a podcast, you're trying to raise awareness for this platform while answering questions, while still being a parent. And I'm assuming you haven't turned Poddit into your full-time job yet. You're still working a regular gig as well, right?
Exhausted is the word you're looking for. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, but the thing is, I've always been driven. My new podcast is called Heart First, and it's all about business should always be personal. And it's just, you do things that are worthwhile for other people. And I feel like this effort will really, I think it'll pay off for us in the long term monetarily. I really do. But I think it will do that because it's going to provide a lot of value for a lot of people. And it was really important for us to make sure that the podcast side and even on the guest side, it was a really good free offering, because we really know that the value is going to be in growing the network. And we wanted to make sure, like on my show, Digital Dads, I had a couple of guests, like a emergency pediatrician who came on and told us about summer safety tips, because unfortunately, she saw drownings and things like that in her occupation. So, but we were able to bring her on the show, bring her value. She probably isn't going to go pay to be in some directory that you may not see, or some other small directory you may not see. But if there's a single place that can grow to be the place where everybody is, it's hugely valuable. And if we do that, enough people want to pay for some premium offerings or some other value things we're adding, then that's going to pay for the network for everybody else. So it's a big endeavor. You're absolutely right. It's going to take time and effort, but I feel like what we're doing matters. It matters for somebody like me doing Digital Dads, and I'm equipped. I know the problem intimately. Yeah, it's just one of those things. How can you not do it when you know there's a chance of it making a difference for so many people?
No, I think that's the biggest thing. And I figured, that this is not only a passion project, but it's also a project where you want to pay it forward, because I think one of the biggest issues with the podcast industry, and, some people may agree with this or they may not, is that once you get into a certain groove with a podcast, you kind of feel that everything is a secret, like, oh, how'd you get this guest? Well, you kind of just explain it in a roundabout sort of way. Or, hey, how'd you do that? Yeah, well, and the problem with that is that at the end of the day, I tell people, it's like, listen, man, nothing is original anymore. So,
right.
So you could say, oh, I just emailed 100 times and I finally got lucky, and that may be a crock of BS. But at the end of the day, guess what? Somebody's going to look online and figure it out. So you might as well just lead with the truth from the start. Like, I'd rather, if I got a guest and I got it through Poddit, I'd say, hey, listen, I got the guest from Poddit. Sign up, go set up your show and get a guest. Because at the end of the day, all you're doing is paying it forward and everyone wins.
Right. And I mean, they still have to show up and do a good job before the guest's going to say yes. Right. I mean, they can apply all day long, but at the end of the day, they're still going to have social proof or something. And we want to introduce features down the road, like where you can have warm introductions and things like that. So utilizing that social graph and seeing who's been on whose show, stuff like that will help so that you can get in the door a little easier with certain people. Because from the guest point of view, you don't know the podcaster necessarily, but it's really hard when you're new to get out there and get these big name guests. But I would argue when you're new, you probably don't want to get big name guests anyway. Cut your teeth on people who are small like you and get good at it first.
Yep. 100%.
And that's one of the values there is that with Poddit, our goal is to be able to help you connect with the right guest. If you're small and a small guest and everybody's kind of timid and intimidated, the software can help bring you together and get you off on the right foot. If you're a bigger name guest and your bigger name show, whatever, maybe that's going to help you with the social graph and different algorithms to help match you up and even ultimately suggest people to you. And that's really where I'm excited as we get going and we start to have that AI kick in a little bit. Well, I say AI, but the algorithms kick in. That really starts to know you and know what you like and know what kind of guests you and your yes, I like them. No, I didn't like that or whatever and why. And we've got tags and all this stuff. We can start to suggest people to you. Well, when I was doing Digital Dads, if you would send me an email every week with 5 people, and this is a key thing too, because they're email services, and I don't want to disparage anybody, but they're email services where it sends me a list of 50 of this and 50 of that, and it's a shotgun, and 99% of it is completely irrelevant to me.
Yep.
And so that does not help me. That's noise, right? What I want is you to tell me and learn and at least be in the same categories that I'm interested in, right? At least, and then if I start to see, hey, this person you might want to interview this person and look, those 3 people, you have mutual connections. So that's interesting. Huh. Or this person gives you a warm lead and they cut a little blurb and say, yeah, I'd love an introduction because X, Y, Z. And now you get that warm lead. So there's some things we can do as we continue to grow to take advantage of the social network part of it and the connection part of it that we haven't gotten yet. Right now, it's really useful right now. We're making connections, but it's just it's really just a framework for what we're trying to build.
No, one thing that really jumped out for me is something that I'm so glad once it really kicks up and like you said, the algorithm really starts to take shape is cold emails, because nothing is worse than you get an email from someone and they want to promote a book or whatever. And again, I respect their hustle. And they're like, hey, I'm writing this book about juggling cats. And, we'd love to have the author on your podcast. And you're like, I don't do anything with cats, much less juggling, much less this. And I think that that's part of the problem. Sometimes your desire to get your podcast up and running forces you to say yes to everything because you're hungry. So you're like, all right, I'll have this person on. Even though I do a podcast about movies, I'm going to have this chef on and he's going to be on here and he's going to get me more. And it's like, yeah, but no, people are going to tune out.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't really help you find your audience, which is really key. You got to be protective of them, even probably from the beginning, if you want to be successful at it.
Yep. Because like anything else, I tell people all the time, you tuned in every Sunday to watch Game of Thrones. The creators of Game of Thrones expected you to tune in. You expected them to give you a good story. So the people that download your podcast expect either to be entertained, informed, or they just want something that makes them feel comfortable. And if you're not checking off any of those boxes, whether it's because you have, guests that don't resonate, or you're not where you need to be as a host yet, you're just doing both sides of the coin a disservice.
It's true. It's true. I would almost argue do a podcast that you could expect to have a relatively short life, a year or so, and then do a new one, once you cut your teeth. But that's going to happen organically anyway. You're going to do a show, and then it's going to run its course, and you're going to do another show. It's just the way I think it works for most people. Some people have crazy long-running shows, but
yeah, I'm actually glad you mentioned that, because I have another podcast that I'm starting to build out. That's here I am running a network and doing less shows, and now I want to start doing more shows. But what I've said is that I'm going to do this podcast as a limited series. Figure it's going to be 25 episodes, and that'll be that. And maybe I'll come back and do some other stuff, but it'll just be 25 episodes, hard stop. And I'm actually going to do it a little differently, in the sense that I want to do almost like a vlog, but in podcast form. Just
I actually like that idea a lot. Yeah.
Stream of consciousness stuff, because I think that what happens is, and I've learned this over the years, just being a podcaster and countless hours spent watching YouTube, we're very, very curious about stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he ends up watching the who's that lady? I guess she like removes like pimples, like Dr. Pimple Pop, whatever her name is.
I'll admit, strange addiction to that. I don't know why.
Exactly, but you see,
there's even like a toy where you can like squeeze them.
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
Yeah, but you see that rabbit hole. Nobody would have thought about. Like those are things like I ended up watching like cooking shows on YouTube because I like to cook. And next thing you know, you've watched 100 hours of cooking shows in a week that you wouldn't even watch in front of your own television. But it's so easy to keep YouTube playing in the background. And that's where I feel podcasting is. We want to be the soundtrack to your life. We want to be playing in the background while you're taking your kids to school or on your commute to work or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing with podcasts. The sort of authenticity of them and the intimacy of them. I think it's the only medium where you're really in somebody's earbuds. It's almost like you're there with them in the car or wherever they're at. It's like your friends hanging around. And I think a lot of the conversations happening on podcasts aren't happening quite the same way on other media either. So it's a really interesting place to be and place to put your voice out there.
Well, I also think it's because sometimes it's just a microphone and headphones. Like, some shows are doing video now. Like, I did video years ago when I was doing my podcast, and I thought, doing video is going to help me connect with people. And it did to a point, but that's not the audience you're trying to serve. If you want to be seen, then go on YouTube. Like if you just want your message out there and you don't want to deal with, hey, I got to get dressed, I got to brush my hair, I got to put on a clean shirt, then do a podcast.
It's true. It's totally true. And there's something special about the spoken word. It's there's a reason why it's starting to catch fire again. Podcasts are all the rage. Even in an age of video, podcasting is really starting to grow.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about, the development of Poddit and the fact, I like that you put right in front that it's beta, but I got to tell you, man, beta or not, it damn sure looks nice.
Hey, we have a designer in our back pocket. So.
It definitely looks good. But what stumbling blocks have you experienced along the way in terms of just getting the platform to where it is? Obviously getting on people's radar is definitely one of them, but what other challenges did you experience?
Getting out the door, shipping. We had 5 guys. We don't come with a bag of extra French fries or nothing, but just 5 dudes that, again, it was me and Andrew who were the co-hosts on Digital Dads. We brought in another guy, then we brought in another guy, and recently we brought in kind of a rock star architect guy as co-founders, and just really fleshing out the idea around work. To your point, the bandwidth consideration of everybody and their schedules, and meeting and just getting it out the door, being okay with it not being completely what we want it to be, because it's not. Admittedly, right now, you can use it. It works. I think it's fantastic to use as a page that you point people to. I'm doing it myself, but it's not the end of even the first idea. But to get there, we needed it out the door so we could get people using it and we could get some feedback. That was critical, and I'm really glad we did. We pushed hard to get it out before Joe Pardo's event, MapCon, and he's a good friend and really great guy, and I wanted to do everything I could to get it out the door there. So we did, and we put a flag in the sand and said, this is when we're going to launch. And we just worked tirelessly to get it out. And that meant product, that meant dev, that meant design, that meant iterations, that meant UI, UX, it meant all of that. It meant grinding, it meant Jira, it meant everything. And we got it out the door. And I mean, that alone, even though you don't have this crazy launch, we don't have, even hundreds of thousands of dollars or anything like that behind us. We're just literally kind of grassroots and bootstrapping and saying, hey, we think this thing's cool. Come check it out. And we know that's going to take longer, but it's helping us in a certain way too, because it's not flooding it. So it works with our bandwidth in terms of squashing bugs and supporting people. I've literally hand walked a lot of people, screen shared with them and helped them set up their profile, answered questions they have. And I'm happy to do so for as long as I have the ability to do it. And so that's been kind of nice. So even though part of me would love to accelerate it faster, part of me knows this is a good pace for us right now. And it's likely at some point it's going to start to sort of catch, and then it's going to be all hands on deck and trying to catch up and scale and all that kind of stuff. So I'm kind of just doing the podcast interviews, doing the social media, trying to make the platform better. Most of my focus, honestly, is not really on marketing right now, even though you see some of that in Facebook group, et cetera. But most of my effort is on product design. What does the feedback look like? What are we missing? What are people stumbling on? How can this be better? How can this be better? How can this be better? Because we care very much about making a good thing. It's us doing it, and my name's on it. It's my thing that I introduced to you to use, and we want you to get value. And if you say, well, but I say, okay, well, let's see what we can do. How can we solve that problem? How can we solve that problem? And I know that after iterations, it's going to be really, really good. So there's been challenges there. There's been some challenges, not too much, but as you can imagine, 5 guys, everybody wanting to make a great product, won't always agree on what that means.
Damn right.
It's inevitable, but we've handled that really, really well. And there's a lot of good leadership on the team. A lot of really good input on the team. I think everybody wants the right things. And so it's kind of coming together. I really feel very encouraged about the remainder of this year. I'll tell you, I don't know when your episode's coming out. We're about to launch an affiliate program for podcasters. So that if the idea is that if you have that page and you point people and that page is phenomenal for you and pointing guests to, and then they apply, some people will sign up. Some people will sign up for free. Some people will eventually upgrade. When they do, you brought them to us. You pointed them to us. We want to make sure podcasters of all people, you get nickeled and dime. I remember it's terrible. And we thought, well, what if we could make this model where podcasters point them to us, everybody gets the benefit, the guest gets to be on more shows, and the podcaster maybe can get to where they don't have to pay for their hosting or something, or, that little bit, because that was also part of the pod thing, is I was paying, I think, $80 a month or something just to put my time. So I put my money, my time, my effort to make a show that I didn't get compensated for, and it's not all about the money, but it would have been nice not to have to at least pay,
right.
And get a little bit back. So
no, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to ask you about something that's always an elephant in the room, and especially for a service like this. Obviously you're providing a lot of value, and I'm telling my listeners and fellow podcasters this, Poddit.net, Poddit.net, make sure to check them out, because you're giving a lot of value out of the gate for free 99, for $0 out of the gate. And I wanted to ask about when you wanted to start monetizing, and you guys offer paid tiers on the site. How did you guys have that conversation? Because if there's one thing we've learned over the years is everybody loves a free app and they'll accept as many shortcomings as possible. But when you tell people to open their wallet, it becomes a completely different conversation.
Yeah. And, we're figuring that out as we go. We have that there, and we'll see if the value makes sense for people. I think on the podcast side, we always want to remain completely free for the podcaster, right? So if you're a podcast and you're trying to get guests, we want you to be able to have your page. We want you to have everything on your page. We want you to invite them. We want them to apply. Everything doesn't cost you a dime, because we were podcasters. That's an important part of it. From the guest side, we feel like as it starts to really populate and fill up, there's going to be a need for guests to get more attention, right? The ones that are seeking, that really are grinding and understand ROI and understand the value of being on that email, that targeted list more, of maybe they can give you an audio version of their pitch. And they say, hey, here's my 1 minute audio pitch or something like that. And it's like, that might differentiate them. So there's some key ways we're going to allow them to be differentiated. And we'll see. I mean, right now we think that's probably going to work. And there's probably enough of a percentage of people that will choose that route, that will monetize it for everybody else. Because let's face it, development and all this stuff is costly. Even for us, our time, we're in tech, and our time is really valuable, and our experience and our knowledge, we could be getting compensated very, very well for this. But we're not, and we're doing it right now for free. But the thing is, we feel like that will likely happen. But if it doesn't, and we get the attention, then there's some other things we can do. There's other pieces of the puzzle we want to add. Like we want to add curated content and have that as part of the deal. There's a lot of different things we could do once we get everybody's attention and provide them value and they trust us. And we just have to be careful not to abuse that. But I think there's some ways that will add value. You can always partner up with podcast events and there's all kinds of ways you can monetize, even going the free route with targeted advertising and things like that. Maybe that's the trade-off. I don't know exactly. Luckily right now the server cost isn't that much. And the dev cost is basically our effort, which is effort, but we're not paying developers yet. So
sweat equity.
Yeah, right now we're doing it ourselves. So we'll see. And I mean, I think that hopefully one of the things we're going to probably do is throttle on the guest side. So for example, we're thinking maybe doing you can apply to one show per day, and then it'll prompt you and say, hey, by the way, looks like you already applied today. You can certainly apply tomorrow. But because that's a convenience thing, right? Like if you applying to 30 shows a month isn't enough for you, then you should probably be somebody that's willing to pay.
Yep,
right.
Absolutely.
And that's just reality. And so if you are in that camp, or it's worth it to you, because a lot of people nowadays are all about buying back their time. They really value spending money on things that give them their time back, because they can't get any more of that. And so in that case, it would be like, well, I could just batch this all at once. If I just pay the $19 a month or $39 a month, I mean, my gosh, I'm an attorney and I get one client out of this in the whole year. It pays for all of it plus.
Right.
So I think that the ROI for some people is going to be huge, and they're going to be like, it's how much? No big deal. And hopefully that percentage is enough to pay for the free part for everybody else, which is really, really cool to me, to be able to find something awesome for a lot of people that might not be in that camp. But we'll see. That's all really written firmly in sand right now, to be honest with you, Rich.
Okay. I gotta ask, I was looking through the paid tiers just because I've been, kicking around if I wanted to go paid just to mess around with it. And I wanted to ask about what you're doing for people that sign up for the lifetime, which is the Podcast Guest Academy. Yeah. And that jumped out for a couple of reasons. Number one, because you can read a book about being a podcaster and you can get fairly good at it, but you can never fully master the art of being a guest.
No, and messaging matters, the tech matters, all that stuff, how you reach out matters, all of that. And Mark Deal, who we partnered with on that, he covers that with, Dan, I forget his last name, but he does that show, books. He reads a bunch of authors and books and stuff, and he knows that side of it with the guests, and Mark knows the side of it with the tech. And so they partnered, and they've got a huge course. I mean, he charges, I think for lifetime on his, he charges $797 in its own right.
Wow.
And so we partnered with him, and he gave us 6 months access, which if you're serious and you're all about it, what we basically did is we were saying, pay us for 2 years worth of product. We know it's early. We're going to give you Mark's deal for 6 months, which gives you plenty of time to go through all his content, and you can get really good at it. And it's an enormous investment in you being able to get booked again, and actually succeed and convert when you do that, and actually have a strategic plan rather than just sort of shotgunning and doing the best you can, So we don't have that side of it on our platform outside of Mark.
Right.
We just, we don't have the content to teach you how to do it, which is a factor for sure. You and I have done it over years. This can teach you in a very, very short time. So it was a really good strategic partnership from us. We basically just eat the cost. He gave us a good deal, and then we eat it just to help you be better and give you an incentive to really invest in the platform early is really what it is.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a huge value prop there as I was reading through it, because I said to myself, you know what? If you get good at being a professional guest, you not only does it open doors for podcasting, but it opened doors for you being a resource for media. I mean, I remember I signed up for a website which is called Harrow, which is the acronym for Help a Reporter Out, which I'm sure you've seen. And it's the same thing. You get pitches and you get stuff. And some of the stuff that you're seeing, people are like, oh, we need somebody that knows this and this and this. And you may know about it, but here's the kicker. You may not know how to talk about it intelligently in front of a large audience. And that is where a course like this is huge.
It's enormous. And you get, from podcast interviews, you get access you wouldn't have normally gotten. It can open up doors to speaking engagements. I think people are under the impression they're going to create a podcast. They're getting all this money from sponsorship. But a podcast can open up so many doors. And being a guest on other people's podcasts gives you so many key relationships that are so valuable to you. I was listening to Pat Flynn's show, and he had Hal Elrod on there of The Miracle Morning, who that book blew up. And he was talking about, what struck me about the episode is Hal was talking about how he went on iTunes. He didn't have a tool to do it. He went on iTunes and he cold emailed every single new and noteworthy in his category to be on their show. And he went on, I think, 57 shows in the first year. He got sick, but he went on 57 shows. And he said, granted, he wrote the book in a way that it changed behavior, and so it would be word of mouth, and that was all on purpose, which, by the way, the book Contagious, fantastic for word of mouth. But the biggest thing he said attributed to him taking off like that was all those podcast interviews, because he was everywhere. It were small shows and they were new shows, but he was refining his message. He was making relationships. He was getting access, and then he was getting access to bigger shows, and he could point to media, and he was showing up. Another thing, it helps you show up in Google search, right? Because when people search for you, they see, oh, you're on that podcast episode. They don't know that it was a small show. It's just credibility is all it is. It's like, oh, you are that expert. So can't speak enough. However, whether it's Poddit or otherwise, can't speak enough about really getting out there and trying to be a guest on podcasts.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Pat Flynn, because I backed his Switch Pod, the tripod. And one of the reasons I did that was because the guy's an authority in the game. So I knew, I'm like, this is a guy that's been podcasting for a long time. He's been a voice in the field. He's not going to put out a product that's garbage. He's not. So when I saw it and I saw, all the different influencers start messing with it, I said, man, what the hell? I'm going to back it. And I got mine recently, and I said,
that's awesome.
I said, this is a proof of concept that, if you're an authority figure, a voice in the field, and this goes back full circle to your service, if you bring value, the results are going to come. Yeah, don't expect it to be overnight unless for some reason it's something insane that you do that automatically just puts you on everybody's radar. But know that if you're bringing value to people and you're bringing people good information, and most importantly, you're helping people in some way, you'll get there.
Yeah, that's key. I mean, I think it's hard right at the beginning, but you got to stop worrying about the outcome and just do the right things and put the right message out there and get on some shows. I mean, that's such a big deal, whether it's through Poddit, whether it's through whatever avenue you want to choose. That's a great way, because there's such a big, long tail of content creators, and everybody's trying to scream and shout. And so when they zig, you want to zag, and you want to get out there and get into some of these audiences that they already trust the host. Like right now, I'm speaking to you. You already trust Rich, so you have give me the benefit of the doubt at least, right? And then it's up to me, but at least you get a foot in the door and people know about you. They wouldn't have known about you. And it's just the access. There's no other medium that you have such access. You try to get on radio shows, you try to get on TV, you can, but when you're new, it's virtually impossible. So, and you can get on some podcasts. Guarantee you can get on some podcasts within a week if you go after it.
Absolutely. One last question, but to wrap up our origin story segment, are you guys are you and your team planning to take Poddit to a mobile application?
Yes,
okay.
We are
awesome.
Talking re-architecting and the whole bit, and that's a big deal. Technically, from a technical standpoint, it's a big deal, but we really want to lean into that kind of mobile first.
Right.
Even though we're not first, but we want to change direction and go mobile first, just from some feedback, because there's some really cool things we saw, like on LinkedIn, where you can be in an event, you can just scan a QR code and automatically, it'd be fantastic if like you could scan a QR code and then you had a guest already, connected with you. That would be fantastic, because that happens at events all the time. So yeah, but that won't happen without an app being developed. So we need to go down that road.
Well, I'm glad, it's funny. We're on the same wavelength, because you brought up LinkedIn, and I was going to say, it'd be cool when you guys do an application and you're at an event, because you can, LinkedIn has a thing where you can find connections locally within the event. So imagine you open up Poddit, you're like, hey, are there any potential guests or podcast hosts here that I might want to talk to? And you just get a ping, hey, they're here. You could message them through the app. That would be phenomenal. Yeah,
that's what we're going for. And the nice thing is, even though we're new and there's some drawbacks to that, and we're small and there's some drawbacks to that, the nice thing is we're new and we're small. And so we're also nimble and we're agile, and we take that feedback and we try to implement it. And as we continue to grow and get more resources, we're going to continue to take that feedback. So what's really been exciting for me is, even though we're kind of steering the ship, we're kind of creating the thing everybody in the group kind of wants. And so we're taking that feedback. And I think that's been one of the big things about like the Facebook group in particular. They love it because they're part of the process.
Yep.
We're pulling back the curtain. We're saying, what do you think about this? Help us do that. And granted, we got to take responsibility for the end result, but you get to be a fly on the wall and actually participate in creating a SaaS, which is software as a service, which you don't get too many opportunities to do that. And honestly, we want this to eventually be a network for content creators. And there's some really big things we want to do. So right now it's connecting guests and podcasts, but there's some other key ways we think content creators can elevate each other through connections. So we're excited to see where we can go.
Yeah, I'm excited for you guys. I'm glad I came across the platform, and I'm more than grateful to be a part of it.
So happy to have you, man. Any feedback you have, we love it. Any way we can help you, we'll do it.
All right. Now we're going to jump into, we have a series of rapid fire questions we call the hot seat, usually relevant to the business, content, and just you as a person in general. So we're going to run through them real easy, stress-free, piece of cake.
I don't feel stress-free right now, Rich, but go for it.
All right. So obviously you being a techie like myself, you're connected. What's your mobile device of choice?
iPhone.
Are you in the Apple ecosystem completely?
Mostly, yes.
Okay.
Once they get you, they get you.
They do. I'm telling you. I mean, I haven't.
And I tell you, I've got tech friends that are very, especially programmer friends that are very anti-Apple.
Right.
In fact, one of our teammates. But
there's always one.
I would argue, and I don't want to start a war with anybody out there. I would argue that Steve Jobs changed the world in his idea of what a computer should be and the user experience of a computer.
Now, with that said, being part of the Apple ecosystem, is your laptop or desktop also Apple?
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So based on that, here's there's a great segue. What are 3 mobile apps you can't live without?
Due to the nature of what we're doing right now, Zendesk, which is a support app, which doesn't actually come up too much, but still, it's a really good way to get feedback from people. Email for sure, and Jira or Discord. Discord's communication with the team. I probably could live without Jira on the mobile device, which is, for anybody who doesn't know, Jira is how you track tickets that you're working on in the application. So,
I
would say Discord, which is a messaging app.
Yeah, I use Jira in my real job. So yeah, I know it all too well. Is your email client the built-in Apple client, or did you use a third party?
I have used both. I default back to Apple because I used to work at a company called AirWatch, which is now VMware, and the notifications work differently on iOS. They give preference to iOS notifications. It's a little bit techie on how it works, but basically the APNS notifications work differently for the Apple client. And long story short, you see the notifications faster. So, and it's not a bad experience. So,
how does your average day play out when you start your day? Since you're a parent, since you're a dad,
kids, get them to school. I have the pleasure and the privilege. Honestly, they're amazing. My son and my daughters, get them off to school, go do the work day. A lot of times working from home, I have that flexibility. Juggle social media a lot. I do have a lot of flexibility with that, thankfully. But then there will be pockets where I go silent because I'm doing calls and things.
Right.
And then after that, as long as I can wrap up and don't have any West Coast stuff going on, I'm on East Coast. So that's when we get into dinner. And I usually try to sit with the kids at dinner, and I usually am able to. So you'll notice a theme here: kids,
awesome.
kids, right? And also checking the tickets. We usually have lately been having a 6 p.m. call every night for about 2 months prior to the beta launch. Every night check-in. On the Poddit side. And then weekends, we love whenever there's a MC Marvel movie or something like that with the kids, or mostly just trying to visit with them. And every weekend we've been meeting for Poddit too lately.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's mostly a day, and then crash late after maybe I do a podcast episode, maybe I don't. Just depends on what's going on.
I commend you. You have tremendous work-life balance, man.
And we watch I usually watch a Blacklist episode with my wife.
Nice.
So that's what we're on now.
Nice. It's funny because that was actually a question I was going to ask, what shows are you watching? So the Blacklist.
Where does your wife fit into all this?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I started. I actually have that on the queue and was actually going to start that this week, because now that the show's far enough along, I can binge watch a couple of seasons here and there.
That's what we did. Really and I like Spader, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's definitely awesome. What's one piece of tech besides your phone or computer that you like?
Phone or computer tech. I don't really use iPad or anything like that too much. I do play some video game. I play Switch with the kids, the Nintendo Switch.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll play that. We'll play Mario Kart. We'll play some Smash Brothers, stuff like that.
Very cool.
I grew up with the original NES, so Switch is a cool thing.
It's amazing how Nintendo reinvented itself, and it went from being, the console that was always in third place to the console that now is pretty much either the top console or always the number 2 for everybody.
Starting to be. Yeah, they killed it with the Switch. They missed it, the one before that, but they figured it out.
I say to myself, it's inevitable that they're gonna eventually just kill the DS or roll the DS into the Switch.
Yeah, probably.
Because there's cannibalization going on right there.
Yeah, you know what I like, and even though they do have the online version, what I do like about Switch and Nintendo, and I grew up this way with the NES, when we used to play multi-person games, it was all in the same room together.
Yep.
And I mean, I get that there's a lot of value not doing it that way, and you can connect with people who aren't near you, whatever. But it's pretty awesome to play with my kids Mario Kart together in the same room. So a little nostalgic for me, but I love that Nintendo still has a lot of that local multiplayer stuff.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. I think that's something that's still, they push Fortnite and everything else and playing online, but playing together never gets old with a good group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Never. No,
my kids are old enough now where they're pretty good at trash talking. So.
Oh, man.
It's fun.
There you go. What was the last book you read?
Super fans. I'm reading Big Podcast now. I've got a stack of, no joke, on my nightstand, 6 high, 2 stacks. There's a lot of them that are unfinished because I just get interested. I love marketing type stuff. Seth Godin, Contagious, I mentioned earlier, by I think it's Jonah Berger. That's a fantastic book. Yeah, avid reader. Love that stuff.
Now, based on that and the fact that you're acknowledging that you have a stack of books, you prefer reading tangible versus digital, huh?
Yeah. I went the digital route. I had a Kindle at one point, and I split it between that and listening to audiobooks, but I like I feel like reading physical, tangible books helps me with my vocabulary, with my intonation. I don't know. I'm pronouncing the words in my head.
Right.
It's just a different experience than the audiobooks. I love them both, and I can't read the physical books on the way to and from work. So there's that. But audiobooks always have to compete with podcasts too. So
nice. What's an item that you purchased that's less than $100 that has made your life either easier or more enjoyable?
Less than $100. The microphone. This I don't even know. I told you I'm not tech savvy, but it's one of those Samson Q2Us or something.
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
that's the podcast, the beginner podcaster recommendation, the Q2U or the ATR 2100 from Audio Technica. It's always either one or the other.
I have had both, and I really like this. I mean, it's made a world of difference. Never got into it. Now that I'm getting back into podcasting, I may have to graduate to another mic. For right now, though, it's been great.
I got to tell you, if you are in the market to look at one, definitely check out the Rode Pod mic. It's $100, man. It's we use a lot of Rode stuff in the studio here, and I just switched my entire set of podcasting equipment and bought the Rodecaster Pro. It was hard parting with $600. Don't get me wrong. But I made the money back just selling everything because I had like a mixer, a noise gate. Right. I had a iPad for a sound pad, to put sound effects. It was, by the time it was all said and done, I essentially broke even selling all my gear. But it was, Rode makes some awesome stuff, and their podcast mics are nice.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about it. So I will be in the market very soon.
There you go. We've talked about the tech. I want to talk about toys a little bit. What's the last toy you bought your kids?
What did I buy them? I feel like we at one point we overindulged on my daughter. The one that stands out is the iPad Pro.
Wow. Your daughter iPad Pro.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah. I don't even have my wife. None of us. But here's the deal. I know it's extravagant, right? And it is. It's not like I just have money to burn. But the thing is, she is big time. Her whole passion, she's 12. Her entire passion is art. She loves drawing. And one Christmas we got her the Wacom tablet, and just didn't really resonate with her as much. She's kind of coming back around to it, but she didn't really love it as much. And I really want to encourage it. So it was, in my mind, it took a lot of convincing of my wife, but it was a big investment in her future, because I really feel like she's insanely talented, loves it, and I really wanted to encourage that. So that was like one Christmas, one huge purchase. You don't expect this ever again, but you know what? This is, her only gift, and also for a little while.
Nice.
But she has nonstop drawn on that thing like unreal. And I feel like that's an enormous investment. When you think about what college is going to cost and all these other kinds of things, it's really not that much compared. And really giving her a lot of ability to stretch and grow and be better at what she's doing. So, yeah, that was a huge purchase, though.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, it's crazy, and you can definitely relate as a parent. When we were growing up, a $200 toy or a $200 video game system was it. Like, you'd get an NES, you'd get a Super NES or whatever, and your parents would be like, all right, that's it. Good luck. That was it. Now,
forget the games. You're not getting games.
Yep. Now it's like $200 is like, we look at $200 like nothing now. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and inflation is part of that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's different. Although, they've got the system, the Xbox and stuff, but overall, it hasn't been like that most of the time. It's just, in her case, that just stood out in my mind because that was a big, big deal. And I mean, talk about like pictures and video of an excited little girl. That was amazing.
I'm sure
for us, for boys, yeah.
And I think more importantly, which a lot of people don't get, but you, much like myself being in the tech space, you get, is that if you foster that creativity, you nurture it, that could become a side hustle. Maybe she does, she'll draw emojis for her friends, or, profile pictures for her friends on social media, or, Snapchat filters now that people can create their own. There's a wealth of opportunity there. And that's one thing that a lot of people, sometimes they forget with investments like this for their kids, especially if they're really into it. It's like, listen, you might pay for that, but you may just be laying the groundwork for what may be their profession, their side hustle. Hell, they may be paying your rent. You know, like I saw a little boy who played Fortnite. He played in the Fortnite tournament, and I believe he won the $1 million or something like that, you know? And he was talking about, he goes, you know, my mom used to shut my system off, tell me not to play it. She used to take my controllers away. And here I am playing for $1 million. And they're like, oh, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, I'm going to pay for her house, you know, like that's, but it's just crazy because we look at that now, and, you know, you and I can speak on that a little bit more just because we're, you know, in the tech space, but
for sure. But it's that whole digital immigrant, digital native thing, you know, It's a different world. And I feel like we've got to try to, now I don't mean everybody just needs to go spend a ton of money on their kids. That's not what I'm saying.
Of course.
But investing in them in certain ways is huge for their success in the future. And it doesn't just mean college. So you got to think about that stuff because the world is different than it used to be.
Yep. I tell my wife, I'm like, there's only 2 non-negotiables I'd like for my daughter, obviously, is to know how to swim and know how to defend herself. And definitely coding would be a nice ancillary thing I'd like to put in there. But I think that's what's happening now. Too many people, to your point, they're not, college isn't cheap, man. And, you know, people can hope and pray that they'll make it free one day, but it's like, listen, you know, more kids are looking at certifications and side hustles and other entrepreneurial endeavors that are night and day from what you and I have to do. You know, we have to go and punch a clock. You know, a kid nowadays can flip sneakers and fund his entire college education by selling and reselling sneakers, you know, just as an example.
No, it's true. It's crazy. And I think it's hard for people to relate that are from a previous generation. I mean, you and I have a different point of view because of the nature of what we do, but it's I know a lot of people who would be shocked, even though my college textbooks the second time around would cost more than that iPad. It's just perspective, I guess.
No, 100%.
That said, it wasn't something we took lightly, but I mean, it's paid off in spades. I mean, that's all she loved to do is draw on that thing. So it's been fantastic.
What was your favorite toy or collectible growing up?
I grew up in very, very early on. I remember a little bit of Star Wars stuff, but really I loved the Thundercats and He-Man, and a few Transformers. My buddy had Soundwave, I was jealous of that.
He's worth an arm and a leg, new in the box now.
Yeah, I know, right? And even back then we thought it was cool. Maybe that's why it has lasted legacy so long. But yeah, really in that 80s vein of cartoons meet toys, you know.
Awesome.
He-Man was a big one.
Oh, He-Man is awesome. I mean, you know, it's funny. There's a company called Super 7. They're redoing the classic He-Man figures, and they're selling them for $45 a pop. And
Super
I'm like,
articulated, right?
Oh man, and I'm like this. I'm like, add to cart. I'm like, what are you doing? Like my office is full of, like, I bought a Lionel off a guy on Instagram that I have in my office from like a newer line of toys. And I'm like, you know, now that we're older, it's like, we have a paycheck. We could buy all this stuff now.
Right.
No,
it's true.
Last but not least, of course, where would you like to see Poddit a year from now?
1 year. I'd love to say that at that point, if I was a new podcaster and I wanted to get guests, that I knew that was the place to go, that there were so many available opportunities in there that could definitely be found very easily. And I guess that's more from the user side. From my sort of co-founder side, I'd love to be able to be doing it full time, which would be monetization to a certain point, but largely because I feel like there's so much more in our mind that we just barely scratched the surface so far. So by getting us to the point where we can go full time, just accelerates the development of everything, you know, the product, everything, the development, coding, all of that, design. And then we can really focus on bringing on the right resources and partnerships and all that. So yeah, that would be ideal. I love it so much. I would love to be doing it full time.
All right. And last segment, we like to add some value to our interviews by doing what we like to call reach one, teach one. One actionable piece of advice we want the guest to give our listeners. So the question to you is, for someone that's looking to launch a SaaS product or is getting their foot in podcasting, what's one piece of actionable advice you'd give them?
For a SaaS product?
Yep. For one of each. Yep.
Yeah, I would say so. For a SaaS product, I would say whatever you think it's going to take more. It's a big endeavor.
Hell of a way to put it.
Be ready for that, and then you can have a plan. Put a team around you and grind it out. But understand it's going to be a grind. It's hard. It's tough work to make something good and get it out to the world. For podcasting, I would say start because you're going to probably, the more you wait and drag your feet and listen to your voice and you don't like your voice and this, the less likely you are to get going. And the only way you're actually going to get going, much like the SaaS, we had to get it out before we could get better at it. Same thing with the podcast. You're going to have to get it out. Now, getting it out doesn't necessarily mean you have to launch it to the world, although I would encourage that, even if it's like hate to call it a throwaway podcast, but put something out there, get some feedback on it, and practice and get better. And then you're going to, no matter what you think, 6 months, a year from now, you're going to be different. You're going to either reinvent the show or you're going to start a new show, but that'll never happen if you don't start. So you got to start.
Damn right. That's a wonderful way to close things out. With that said, where can people find Poddit, keep up with you, and keep up with the development of the project? So
they can find Poddit, poddit.net. They can keep up with the project, probably the Facebook group. Just search for Poddit on Facebook. And me, if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Brent Bash. And I'm usually all over the place everywhere else. So
there you go. And I will make sure to include links for that in the show notes for this episode. Brent, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share the toys and tech of your trade.
Yeah, love it, man. Love your show. Thanks a lot.
That wraps up our episode with Brent Basham, co-founder of Poddit. Once again, if you are a podcaster or a guest that's looking to get your message out there, definitely check out Poddit. It's a great service. It's, free 99 to start. Jump in, set up your profile for your podcast or for yourself, and get yourself some leads or get yourself on some shows. I think it's a nice and easy, pain-free way to get your message out there, whether you're a guest or a podcaster that's looking to go on other shows and be a guest. I mean, the opportunities are definitely there, so take advantage of it because, again, it's a free service. There are paid tiers, as I mentioned during the interview, but just right out of the gate, a lot of value on the free side of things. So sign up and get your guests or get yourself on some shows. Links for Poddit, Brent's social, and everything else will be in the show notes for this episode, as well as some of the gadgets, the gear, and the tech that we discussed will also be in the show notes for this episode. As always, full disclosure, some of those items may contain affiliate links, which if you click, we'll receive a small commission, which of course goes towards keeping the lights on around here, giving you guys better content, whether it's on our podcasts, on our YouTube channel, or on our website. So every click and every purchase through those links, we truly appreciate. All right. Toys and Tech of the Trade can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, your podcast platform of choice. With regards to social, you can always follow us at RageWorks or Rage_Works on Twitter. Links for all of our social will be in the show notes for this episode. And if you want to keep up with my nonsense, I'm not hard to find. My links are in there as well. And more importantly, primary methods of engagement are Instagram. 99% of the time it's just open or accessible to me so I can hop on and answer comments or DMs. Secondly, our Facebook group. So definitely feel free to join that if you want to interact with all of our guests as well as our hosts and even our audience, just because we talk about everything that we cover on the site: games, gadgets, entertainment, movies, wrestling, MMA. We definitely cover it all in the group. It's a nice, safe community where everybody can talk about all of their passions in one place. Last but not least, if you'd like to be a guest on a future episode of Toys and Tech of the Trade, you can email me, rich@rageworks.net, or fill out the contact form on the site, either on rageworks.net or on the podcast network. Or if you're on Poddit, you can solicit us via Poddit as well. Just look for Toys and Tech of the Trade on Poddit and reach out that way if you'd like to be a guest. Thank you guys for letting us beam this week's episode into your headphones and speakers. We will check you guys in 2 weeks. Peace.
Right now, switch your family to T-Mobile and get 4 lines for $25 a line with AutoPay and 5G access included on America's largest 5G network. So don't wait. Get unlimited and nationwide 5G access for the whole family for just $25 a line. Visit a T-Mobile store or T-Mobile.com today.
Plus taxes and fees. Customers may notice lower speeds and further reduction if using over 50 gigs a month due to data prioritization. Video at 480p. Unlimited while on our network. Qualifying credit and 4+ lines required. Capable device required for 5G. Coverage not available in some areas. Some uses may require certain features. See T-Mobile.com.
Hey, I'm Kayla. As a mom working from home, life is crazier than ever, especially on days like these. But I'm still ruling my day thanks to Metro. Metro gave me an awesome phone and tablet. Now my son can get his homework done on the tablet without needing to borrow my laptop. Plus, with Metro, Amazon Prime is included, so I can access great deals and discounts on school essentials and get them delivered in no time with unlimited free shipping. All while keeping an eye on my son to make sure he finishes his online practice tests before he starts watching his favorite Amazon originals.
Right now, get a new phone and tablet on us when you switch to Metro, the #1 brand in prepaid. Plus, enjoy high-speed data on both devices with 1 Amazon Prime membership included for just $75 a month. Metro by T-Mobile. Rule your day.
I'm Kayla, and that's how I rule my day with Metro.
With new lines of service after rebate redemption plus sales tax and activation fee. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members on select rate plans. Amazon Prime has a $12.99 a month cost. Restrictions apply.